Joining me now is White House Communications Director Ben LaBolt. Ben, congratulations on the gig, first off, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Katie. Thanks for having me.
So tell me, where does a deal stand? Where does the negotiation stand?
Well, we're getting closer to a deal. The president's negotiating team has been negotiating with House Republicans multiple times a day since last Sunday when the Speaker and the president talked. And they went late into last night. There was another meeting today. And so we're getting a bit closer. And I think the good news is all congressional leaders have agreed that default isn't an option. And so now there's a negotiation over the terms of a budget path forward. The president and his negotiators are negotiating to make sure that we don't give up key priorities, that we don't place on the backs of hardworking Americans that they have to fund a tax cut to the tune of $3 trillion for the wealthiest, and that we protect the economic gains of the first 2 years of this administration, 12.7 million jobs created, manufacturing coming back. Every minute in these negotiations, the president's negotiators are working to protect those priorities and at the same time trying to get a bipartisan deal that can pass both chambers.
Can you give me some specifics about where you stand? Are you still talking about work requirements, first off?
Well, look, I don't want to get ahead of the negotiators in the room. They need to be given the space to do their jobs. What I can tell you is that that's not the president's preferred path forward. He's introduced a budget with $3 trillion of deficit reduction in it. He's already reduced the deficit by $1.7 trillion in this administration, and he's put forward a bipartisan agreement in these negotiations that would cut spending by $1 trillion more. But he doesn't think that should be done on the backs of the most vulnerable in society, and he thinks revenue should be part of the discussion. And so we've brought to the table $200 billion in savings by allowing Medicare to negotiate prescription drug costs down, or eliminating the $30 billion subsidies for oil and gas companies that made $200 billion in profits the past year. We have a different approach to deficit reduction than House Republicans, but we're each going to need to give a little bit in the negotiation to get things done in time.
So it sounds like the job requirements, you said not preferred. That doesn't mean they're off the table. It doesn't mean it's a red line. Would you consider, or are the negotiators able to consider saying yes to some more job requirements, work requirements, in exchange for the prescription drug negotiating power, as you just mentioned, or getting rid of those $30 billion in subsidies for oil and gas?
Well, look, there are already work requirements in many of the programs that we're talking about here. The president voted for them years ago, but he thinks the work requirements in those programs are already sufficient, and we don't want to create a bunch of bureaucratic paperwork that, for example, kick millions of people off of their health care. And so that's the posture that negotiators are bringing to the room. I'm not going to get into every detail and red line here because they're in the middle of that negotiation right now.
So they're not going to discuss Medicare. That's kind of what we've been reporting for a while, that if there are new work requirements, that it would be on food stamps perhaps, but not Medicare. I know you're here to give us the lay of the land, but if you're not going to get into details, what else can you tell us about the lay of the land?
Well, what I can tell you about the lay of the land is that negotiators are in the process of doing everything they can to strike a deal on a budget framework. Look, there's a Democratic president and a Republican House, and so there was always going to need to be a negotiation over the budget. The president put his budget forward on March 9th. He waited until April 26th until Republicans put their budget forward, and he's had negotiators in the room since then trying to get a deal on a budget path forward. Everyone is aware of the deadline surrounding default. We're working to make sure that Congress acts as quickly as possible. You heard from the president just an hour ago, again urging Congress to avert default now and pass legislation now. And that's what we can do from here, because ultimately this is a congressional responsibility.
For so long, the president and the White House had said that they weren't negotiating on this, that a debt ceiling wasn't negotiable, that it should just be a clean raise, as it had been done in the past. We heard about the lessons learned from 2011, the negotiation with President Obama and the Republicans. Why are you suddenly negotiating now?
Well, look, I think the president has made clear that default is not negotiable, and there's an agreement from all of the leaders of Congress, all four leaders, to say that default must be averted. And that's what we're heading towards. We're heading towards averting that outcome, which is critical and is going to protect jobs and make sure that we don't tip into a recession. A budget negotiation is a separate matter. That's something that would have to happen this year. The president put forward his vision for continued investments in things like the clean energy economy or keeping prescription drug costs down. The Republicans put forward their vision, which involves a 22% cut to programs like the Department of Education, like Meals on Wheels. And so now there's a back and forth to determine the path forward. I don't think the ultimate agreement here is going to look like 10 years in spending caps, like was agreed to in 2011. But we're still working through the path forward here. That's exactly what negotiators are doing right now.
Why have we heard so much from Kevin McCarthy and his lieutenants on this? We hear from them multiple times a day, and we've heard so little directly from the president, directly from the White House. I know you're on today. We appreciate it. Why aren't we hearing every day from the president at length, talking to reporters or out in the stump, talking about how this is a bad idea to default? I mean, if you just watch television or you read any newspaper or newsletter, you'll see a ton from Republicans and from some Democratic lawmakers, and not so much from the White House other than memos.
We're focused on driving towards an outcome here, Katie, and I don't think that's wholly accurate. You've heard from the president in this discussion beginning March 9th. He's been out there at least once a week on this. He held
Kevin
a full
McCarthy's
press
out there
conference
multiple times a day. He's out there once a week. That's a disparity.
He's a member of Congress, right? Members of Congress hold press conferences multiple times a day.
The president has a few steps to walk over to the press briefing room and a number of reporters. Every time he walks to leave the White House, he walks by reporters.
I don't think that would be helpful in driving towards an outcome in the negotiations, Katie. You need to leave the negotiators some space, and you want to preserve the power of the bully pulpit for critical moments. You just heard from the president an hour ago, giving you an update on where negotiations stand.
It was very quick, and you're talking about the bully pulpit for critical moments. Would you say this is not a critical moment? Janet Yellen said we'd be going toward economic catastrophe if we defaulted.
I do think it's a critical moment, which is why you heard from the president holding a full press conference about this, where he answered 45 minutes of questions on Sunday. He provided another update today. You've heard from his press secretary every single day. But the fact is, when you're involved in a complex negotiation, you need to empower people in the room to be able to land the plane. The president has weighed in at key moments. He spoke directly to Speaker McCarthy last Sunday. He's called the leaders of Congress to the White House multiple times to meet. And he'll continue to be hands-on when his intervention can help land the deal.
How hands-on is he going to be to convince nervous Democrats who have expressed their nerves? I named a few of them at the top, that the White House is going to be given way too much to the Republicans.
Well, I would say don't prejudge the agreement before you've read the agreement, and we're not at the final agreement yet. The president and his team have been doing everything they can to preserve key parts of his agenda, to protect Medicare, to protect Social Security, to protect the millions of Americans who get their health insurance from Medicaid. And so I'd recommend not prejudging it until that agreement is in front of them.
Ben LaBolt, we